You're listening to Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And this is the show for you if you are sick of the artificial, synthetic world that's encroaching around us at all angles. And also if you're very curious about how things actually work. What's the truth about things? What's the truth about health, about our bodies, about our psyche, about law, about legal stuff. In this week's episode, we interview Skye and we talk about the legal system in a way that I was pleasantly surprised at how interesting and engaging it felt. We had a lot of fun.
It's a really interesting topic to explore because some people might think, well, what's the law got to do with, who we are and how we function and how we're meant to operate in the world? It actually has a lot to do with it. And when you really dive into this stuff, it's like the more you uncover, the more, to put it bluntly, the more fuckery you see that actually goes on in the world.
Yeah.
But I love the way that Skye speaks about this because it's very balanced. Like we're not saying that, there's certain people that want to throw out the old system and we got to burn it all down. And it's like, that's not feasible. Yeah. That's not going to happen. And at this current point in time that we're in, we do need both systems. We need the system that's currently there. There are a lot of people that literally would not survive without it. And then, there's this other side of things that we can learn and start to build in the private. But it's really about having the understanding of both. I think that's where we're at this point in time. And it's how do we sort of go between both of those worlds.
Yeah. And the way I see it in this topic, there's two main problems that I see because I've been watching and listening to this for over 5 or 6 years now. But there's two problems. One, the people that want to throw out and fight the whole system and just go, fuck it, we're going to, we're not paying taxes, we're doing our own thing. That's one problem. The other problem is there's a lot of people that talk a lot about it, but don't actually know or do. They're talking like they've done the thing, but they haven't. And that is probably the worst of the two because they're leading other people into something that they don't have any skin in the game on.
Yeah.
Skye is neither, which is actually quite a breath of fresh air because she's very grounded, very real, and she has actual real experience. And she could have a very nasty attitude about everything, but she understands from the other side. She sees the way out is a path of purity, knowing who you are, where you stand. Yeah. And I can't wait for you guys to hear that. Yeah.
And that's such a huge point. That's always what this stuff comes back to, whether it's the law stuff that you're exploring or whether it's like homeschooling your kids or having kids and doing it differently and, not using the medical system. It always comes back to knowing who you are at the core of who you are and having that trust with God, the divine, the universe, whatever you want to call it. That's always what it comes down to. And that's what we're all about here at Natural AF.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a lot of things to get into with this episode. So it's kind of a long one. So we won't bore you with a super long intro, but we thank everyone who's been listening and supporting, sharing this episode with people that might get a lot out of it, giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcast and Spotify will help go a long way to helping us reach more people. It'll help our podcast be easier to find. And you can consider that you're paying it forward, doing that to help other people find the show and hopefully enlighten them to a new and better way.
And over on the natural art form side, we want to thank everyone that is ordering online. We've had some crazy weather up here in the Northern Rivers the last few weeks. And unfortunately, we've had a lot of markets canceled. Some we've been to, and it's just been kind of quiet because it's really yucky, wet, soggy weather. So we are so grateful always for the online orders that come through. And of course, for our listeners, we have 10% off for you, off your entire order, no matter how many times you order using the code NaturalAF10 at checkout. And while you're on the website, don't forget to join the mailing list if you haven't already. We send out our monthly newsletter and you can keep up to date and in the loop on everything that we've got going on over there.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening and we hope you enjoy this episode. Let us know what you think. And with that, let's get straight into the episode. Skye Marissa-Rose is a mother, a writer, and a woman who has walked many roads, from journalism to early childhood education, from business to the tangled depths of our commercial systems. Her journey hasn't been linear, but through all of it, she has come to see that the way forward may not be through resistance, but through alignment and reconciliation with self, with others, and with the systems we move through each day. Skye shares from the ground as someone learning, unlearning, and choosing to meet life with open eyes and an open heart. She invites others to walk beside her, to honor the process of remembering our place on earth, and to rediscover what it means to live with our dignity and hold your own record with care. Welcome to the show, Skye. It's wonderful to see you again.
Thanks for having me. It's great to see you too.
Oh, so great to have you on. I'm so excited for this chat. It's been a long time coming, it feels like. So let's kick it off and give you the floor to share a bit of your journey and what started you on this path of what you call self-governance.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short because it feels like a long, windy one. But The way I describe it is I'm a farm girl and, grew up on the land. And I suppose in relation to private governance, what I witnessed in my father was a man who taught me from a very young age that your word is your bond. So that was, interesting language and a lot of, principles and ethics in commerce that he modeled to us. And I haven't really reviewed this or reflected on it till recently. You kind of don't really notice these things at the time. And it's only looking back, you're like, wow, that's, those are important learnings that he instilled. So business was about, honouring your word, and I watched him live it out. So when he was dealing with other farmers, I would describe those agreements as contractual, but they were very private because they were between farmers, really, between men. And so watching him do those relationships was, very valuable and rich to me. I also watched him do business with grain merchants and different agencies and organisations. And there was a distinct difference when I look at his experiences of the treatment that he received from public agencies, merchants, if you like, versus the interactions that he'd have with other farmers relating to sheep or grain or those sorts of things. So I guess I was getting some early learnings through that quite, in the first instance. And then in my personal life as a woman, I started having these dalliances with the family court, which for me were very frightening because I was very sheltered. I'd been away to the city and been to boarding school, but I was really not very street smart. So I was kind of thrust from this very innocent way of life into these commercial situations. And at the time, because I didn't understand the system, they seemed like they were family court matters. But what I learnt later was that they were just commercial matters. And the thing that's involved happens to be the kids. So, at the time I'm going through these pretty hairy scenarios. I went through one and then I went through another. And it was really perplexing to me because in every instance, it was not because I was withholding anything. In fact, I was trying to always forge a private agreement with the other party to make sure that the kids were central to decision making, but that I could move on with my life and support myself and that the other parties could do the same. So I had these unfortunate altercations with the court system early on. And then, I kind of moved through that and I was left a little bit confused, but I just, these things are traumatic and I didn't really want to focus on that. It wasn't really till I went through the last one of those, which was ultimately a divorce, where it was, I don't even know how to express it, but it was hairy is the best way I can say it.
Right.
My dad actually had to come up and stay on the property. There were injunctions that went down. A whole bunch of crazy stuff happened. I was the respondent in that instance. I couldn't leave a 20-acre property. And crazy things were happening. And my dad flew in and he came and sat out the door like a big guard dog till the courts could work out what they had to do. Poor guy. And he's just running his business off his iPad. But during this time, through researching multitudes of case law, because I felt very fearful at the time that and interstate relocation was not, common at the time. It's very difficult to get one. And at the end of the day, I didn't want any property. I'm like, take the lot. I just, I'm the primary care for the kids. I just need to be able to do this. But it went where it went. And I see now that it had to go that that way for me to have these learnings. But Dad uncovered at this time that there was these kind of two parallel systems running. And that prompted him to go on his own journey of, I guess I call it private law study. You can call it common law, whatever sort of floats your boat. But once he did that, I was sort of like feeling so traumatized from my divorce that I was like, I need to become a lawyer now. I'm just going to become a lawyer, and then that way I can handle any business that comes my way. It was just like this frightened little girl, it was like, I'll just become a. So I did. I started, I relocated, I started studying law, and then I'd have these discussions with my dad, and I'd be talking about legal law, and he'd be talking about, lawful law, if you like. I just executed that very poorly, but that was the gist. And we'd have these debates, and he just would, the energy of what he said every time outweighed the energy of something that I was delivering. The legal system had no soul. It was soulless. So every time I'm articulating something, I felt empty inside, and it didn't feel good, and it didn't feel righteous. It made sense logically, but it didn't lift me up in my heart. And then when I'd hear him talk, I'd be like, wow, like that feels rich. That feels like it's aligned with goodness. So he went on this very bold journey, and I was really fortunate because he did a lot of study with really clever guys that were doing great things, and I got to kind of have the short track version. So he kind of advanced my learning because I would pay attention, and where a lot of people at the time thought, this is back in 2014, so people at the time started to think he was going crazy, but I didn't. I could understand. It all made sense, and things that I'd been through spiritually in my life as well. The law he was talking about was speaking to this, and was starting to he helped me make more sense of my world, of why things weren't adding up, of why people were so inherently unhappy, just as a general populace, of why we were self-medicating, of why there was just this disconnect or something that we saw, and then happy people were almost the exception to the rule. It's like, this makes sense now. We're not doing it right for some reason. So I just was really fortunate, I guess, divine timing, different bodies of work were put in front of me, and I just decided at some point to take up that path. And the real catalyst for change with me was my fourth son arriving, and that birth, that creation, and bringing the vessel through the body for a woman. It's a rite of passage. It just alters you, and every single one alters you. So it's just this profound rite of passage each time. And by the time my fourth son arrived, it just shifted me in such a big way, because he was at the precipice of this big shift I was already on. But then when I saw this being coming, into this earth, and then I'm looking at the legal system, the registration process, all of it was like, oh my gosh, like it was huge to sit with, and to realize that when you know better, like for me, if I know better, I've got to do better. And something in my body was like, I just don't feel good doing this the same way. And so I felt very charged, like I needed with every fiber optic of my being to do something, but I felt very helpless. I felt panicked because I lacked knowledge, really was what it was about. I had no education or edification about how to even operate and walk these two worlds. In my dad's case, he can just get rid of one world. He's at a point in his life where he's like, I'm just not engaging. But I'm sort of over here with a family, and I have to walk both worlds. So, I just decided that knowledge is power, and we know knowledge is power because that's why historically, for different cultures, their go-to is to burn the books. Their go-to is to disconnect culture from their own inherent knowledge. So I decided to just get whatever knowledge I could and trust that whatever I need at the time is the right thing for me. And that's exactly how it's been. And really now the way I describe what I'm doing is just trying to, for myself, get a toolkit of knowledge, of tools that, depending on what particular issue that I'm confronted with, or that I can confidently administrate or stand as a fiduciary for my person, my ens legis, and, stand and do whatever is required lawfully, honourably, but without the fear that the public system can try to, place upon us. So
Yeah.
trying to have a certain maturity about commerce, if you like. And it's, I've taken some hits on the way. It's not a walk in the park, because that's the test. I think physically and spiritually, it's about, are you really willing to go there? Are you prepared to stand and to walk out what it is you believe? And unfortunately for me, it's just a hard full body yes. Stop. But I can't. It's like a knowing in my body, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for sharing that. I feel like so many people can relate to that, especially if they've started to get more into this stuff and go through those lawful processes, because I can definitely relate to that, where you do kind of feel a bit helpless. You feel like I've been there where I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what any of this means. Because you can kind of get the broader concept, but when you actually start to do it, it is a bit tricky. But I think even in that, it's a rite of passage, like we've spoken about too. Like, I think anyone that walks a more authentic path, you are faced with these challenges that are like, well, are you going to buckle under the pressure, or are you just going to knuckle down and do it? Because I think nothing worth having comes easy. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It just means that sometimes we have to face challenges, and at the end of the day, they make us stronger. And that rite of passage, it gets us to the other side where we can be like, yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for people that are new to all this, is this where people go into the courtroom and they say, I'm a sovereign man, I don't answer to my name in all caps, and then they basically challenge the judge and tell them that they have no authority over you because you're a living man and all that stuff?
Well, and before you answer that, I guess in that question, do you want to sort of explain the public versus private, which you've sort of just touched on, and maybe in that, because maybe explain like the whole straw man concept as well with the public versus private.
Yeah, look, and I'm not like an absolute guru on expressing all of the way the different trusts work as this transaction occurs. So I won't go there, but I'm just going to talk about it very generally so I don't like bombard people too. But basically what happens is, a little being comes through the portal of the mother, and a lot of this is like maritime and admiralty based in shipping. So when you look at the language of the doctor, you're docking the vessel. It's pretty interesting when you start to look at the language. But basically this vessel comes through, the son or the daughter comes in through the mother, and it's there, and this little being is essentially a sovereign being. It's under creator's dominion. It has no legalistic things imposed onto it. It's just by nature it's just in the earth. And then what happens is we've all been led to believe that we need an identity to get through life. We need an identity to do things. What they don't tell us is that identity creates commercial, joinder and different things, like a set of obligations and, a sense of suretyship. But basically we think we've got to get this little being an ID. So we race off and we fill in a birth registration form, and then we go and deposit that. But we don't really specially deposit it. The mother just generally whacks it in there and goes, here you go. But theoretically what's kind of happened, so they say, is that, you've just given away the deed to something because it's your property. And then you've just gone and transferred a title for that over to a legalistic, fictional corporation, essentially. So that transaction, that deposit by the mother, creates a birth certificate. So now we run around the earth carrying this birth certificate going, I'm that and that's me. But it can never be, because it's on a piece of paper. Yeah. And if you go into the rules around dog Latin and all the, stylization, all that kind of thing, it's really corporate fictions. But what happens is that once we've done that pledge, it's created a bondage for the son or the daughter. So then you're running around through life, and every time, because the only way, really money can be made, if you understand the true nature of money now, post 1933 and the gold being removed from backing the currency, that money is just these pieces of paper, these, instruments that hold value but we're joined to it now because we're running around saying, that's me. And the judge goes, great, that's you. You're the surety. You need to pay. And you're going to pay with your body, or you're going to pay with this. So when you come in and you say, I'm not that thing, well, then what they're saying is kind of true, but it's the way that I think, I don't know, I don't want to make any bold claims, but the way I see it is it's the way that you step up and correct that claim before you go making the claim. So if you rock up in court, so you've got to think the court's got records. It happens when it's deposited at the registry. They are always sealed by the court, and it usually goes back to the state, Supreme Court. And they're holding all these records. And because we didn't know this, we've operated for 18 to 25, 40 years maybe on the assumption and presumption that we are that thing. We've probably never rebutted it formally. We've never tried to step up and go, oh, hey, we think a mistake was made, but we're here to try to do better, and we want to now go and sail that merchant ship properly. We just start, getting into court and saying blah, blah, blah. And then we're not really taken seriously. So the intention, I think, of what people are trying to do is probably correct. It's just the methodology that maybe doesn't allow for that standing, because what you're interfacing with now on that public side is basically water. You took that baby off the land and you whacked it into water world, just very simplistically speaking. You gave it a persona in water world. So when you're on the water, you're basically, I just think about it like Pirates of the Caribbean,
yeah.
Versus being, 2 feet firmly on the land. But if you're going to stand in front of a judge and say, well, I'm the living man, that commercial system can't intercourse with that. Like,
so are you the Johnny Depp character that's holding the jar of dirt?
I'm going to end up being Captain Jack Sparrow, no?
I've got a jar of dirt.
I don't know. It's just, all I know is it's crazy on the water. It's crazy and it's pretty lawless. It's legally, it just seems pretty lawless at times, not always, right? Like it's just, you got to have a laugh about it. But yeah, I mean, on that side over here, that's where really our inherent rights are, but it's just expressing that to the court, because once you get an invitation to attend these premises, you again, the fact that you show up, you're saying, well, yeah, like I'm here for that. So it's, I don't have anything great to tell you about how to deal with that, and I'm not going to go there, but but that's the idea. The idea is that we were taken out of our natural state through a commercial process that puts us into another state or status. And so then how do we learn how to, instead of fighting even against that scenario, learn how to move our position in that scenario? Because if that was set up theoretically to benefit me, but I'm not being benefited, I'm being held as the obligee, well then, or the surety, well then maybe I want to look at just shifting my position and then using that to work with the system as opposed to fighting it. That's kind of where I think that our, for me, I'm feeling now like, you can choose friction or you can find the flow in the continuum and you can find the way through. Like we're aligning. How do we align, if that makes sense, without subjecting, aligning without subjecting.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I love that you said that, because I think that's a big one for people to really wrap their heads around before they start going through these processes, because we've seen a lot in the last few years, especially people learning this stuff and going and challenging the courts and going through. And now some people have been successful once or twice, but when you keep going and going and going, that's when you're having these really negative experiences. And again, the energy behind it is often like a lot of anger and a lot of like, fuck the system and wanting to tear it down. But I think that's what we've got to come to, is especially for this time that we're currently in, because like you said, most of us have lived our whole lives up until whatever age we are at this point in time, just contracting with our birth certificate, with our driver's licenses, with all these things, these pieces of paper that we had no knowledge of before. And so now I think it is very much about navigating both worlds of the public and private, because I think to fully exit the public system, it's really just not, I just don't think it's realistic, to be honest.
But maybe it was designed for us. We just have to get the commercial maturity to actually come in and do that. That's, maybe it's not against us if we're coming in the right manner. That's what I'm exploring. Like maybe
that's the way I look at it.
built for us, but we just have to demonstrate. And it's not about, this is what I'm learning. This is where the test comes in. It's not about a tick or flick process. Like, okay, Alexa, here's my tick and flick process for how you redeem or reclaim your position with the public system. And you go and get that, but your energy is not in that. And also too, you get questioned by the first agent that calls and you fall because you're not embodying it yet. Like I love my tests because every test that I get is showing me, are you living this? Are you embodying it? Every time I get called something and I don't rebut it, every time I do this, it's like, am I competent? Am I at the point where, because the whole thing is, and this is a big learning for me, I've had to, have a lot of smacks and I can cough up to them. To your point, Alexis, like I've done things like with traffic, right? And same thing. And, I wanted to learn. Really, my intention just was, well, I want to do this because I want to learn and understand the mechanics. So I would fight, I would try to do a process over like a traffic infringement. And then I'm sitting back going, Skye, you're just an asshole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yes, you wanted to learn and that's fine. But if you look at the thing that you did that you got the fine for, like, you are just an asshole. Like, there's a reason we have speed limits, particularly through zones that, have kids running through them and different things happening. So it's like, not everything is against us. Like the reason we have public governance to a degree is because we need socially acceptable standards of behaviour that maintain a certain level of safety. The problem I think now is that it's just going too far the other way, where we've removed so much common sense thinking and so much more statute is coming in because, again, they make money every time they can fine us. It's just going out of balance. But that doesn't make it inherently evil. And I think that was one of the energies that I was carrying when I first woke up to things. And I think it's also okay and it's normal to be there because that's part of the grief thing of being duped. Like you wake up and you're like, holy hatbox, I've been duped. And so you got to have the anger. Yeah. And that's all good. But where do we want to put that anger? Like going and fighting a traffic ticket, I'm not criticizing anyone else. But for me, I'm like, well, I'm glad I had the learning and I'm also glad that I got, a rap over the knuckles for it because the truth was, like, I'm not proud of that. Like I would do that differently. So this is the thing where I feel for myself in particular, I'm constantly saying, okay, well, if we truly want to self-govern, what is the balancer there? Because self-governance just doesn't mean you've got a ticket to like go and do whatever the hell you want. It comes with an even severer level of divine jurisprudence. More freedom equals more accountability, not just more freedom. It's just completely out of balance.
Yeah.
So that's the part I think for me with, my motto is always intention is everything. What was my intention? And really trying to ground back into that because that's, to go the other way, that commercial realm, even though it can't interface with the living, it's not going to take anyone seriously anyway. You just look like it's petulant. I have been a petulant toddler. Totally. I'm finding it.
Yeah. Well, and I'll share my experience with that because it's a perfect example of like the energy what your energy is behind whatever you're doing, how it will dictate your outcome as well. This starts all the way back in 2021. So to set the scene, because I think I shared this once before, but on a previous episode, but it wasn't very clear, the story. But it started 2021. It was during lockdown. I went through a school zone. It was normally 50 and it was a 40 school zone. And it was during lockdown, all the schools were closed. So I'm doing 50 and got done on the camera saying I was doing 10 kilometers over the limit because it was a 40 school zone. So 2021 was when I hit the shit. Like, during COVID, I was like, fuck this, like, fuck the government, everything. Because this is when I started to learn all this stuff for the first time. So I was like really in it at that time. And that was my attitude. I was like, fuck them, I'm not paying this. I started sending it back. I was like, return to sender, doing that thing. That doesn't work. And, I let it go on for, I don't know how long it ended up getting sent to like Revenue New South Wales. I kept adding more money to it to the point where it got, I think it was like $150 fine or something. It was like $500 a couple of years later. And by that time I couldn't take it to court anymore. So then they started suspending my license and canceling. It got to the point where they canceled my registration. I got pulled over with a suspended license that had also expired actually. and an unregistered car, which ended up being about $2,700 worth in fines. This was a couple of years ago now. And so I was like, well, I'm going to take this to court. I'm not paying it. And still same really bad energy. But by the time it got to the court date, Isaac had just moved over not long before that. And I was just I hadn't been learning the stuff I needed to learn and how to like present myself and do all this stuff. So I ended up having the matter heard in my absence. I filled out the paperwork and I just said to them, and again, this is when my energy really shifted, because I was like, I don't have this energy to like go in and fight it. Like there's so many more important things going on in my life right now that I want to put my energy towards. Yeah. And I did. I just dropped all this really, angry, combative energy. And even in that instance, having the matter heard in my absence, they knocked $1,200 off the fine. And I was like, whoa. And that was including like they added the court fees. It still ended up being $1,200 less than what I would have had to pay. So that was my first like instance where I was like, oh, wow, just shifting my energy, I got a better outcome. And then recently I got a fine for not wearing a seatbelt correctly on one of the safety cameras, got me on the highway. And long story short, it was after a surgery. I had a doctor's certificate and all that. And I went in, I answered to the name. I played their game. I wasn't fazed by it. Told them the story, whatever. How quick was it? It was in and out, dismissed, all done, like walked out of there scot-free. And I think that's just such a beautiful example of like what you were saying. And for me, that experience really did prove that that's what has to come first, is the intention and the energy behind what you're doing.
Yeah, I think so, because it is like what I'm learning through the law side of things. That's why I love it. Like I've said before, people have the different medicines and their way of experiencing reality, but I love this because commerce is commerce, and so it's not emotional, and yet it gives you so much feedback about your inner emotional world. Like it's really an interesting dynamic to play with, and the same thing. And so I've been able to watch, like as I go through different things, because I started there, and anyone again doing it, I'm not like judging anybody, because I think it's part of the thing. If you want the fight, go have the fight, like, because you'll have the fight for as long as it takes for you to realize that maybe the fight's not the thing, so that's all good stuff. It's just everyone in their own time, so I'm certainly not judging it, but it's that accountability in me, and really looking at like, I've never really I went down a little bit of a new age path for a while and the whole manifestation thing, but, I really do see that energy, like people talk a lot about manifestation, but we're actually embodying it and living it as we go. And so that is the direct feedback. I don't know if I'm articulating this very well, but you get to really explore that through living situations. And if you're paying attention, I haven't paid attention a lot. Just gone through life from one drama to the next, not dialing in, not going, where's the wisdom? Where's the gold here? Now I'm like, hey, that was crap.
Yeah. We had Mark Divide on recently. Yeah. And he talked about something I learned early on reading his books, and he's a Navy SEAL, and he talks about winning in the mind first. And this almost feels like it's a natural extension of that, where it's like win in your energy, win in what you're embodying first. And then whatever you go into, like I think Kelly Brogan said that recently too, where it was like, if you don't embody anything that's blameful, you don't hold shame, you don't hold guilt, then energetically you're not attracting the predators to you to prey on your guilt and your blame and your shame. Yeah.
And I think
so true.
Yeah, and I think you did explain that perfectly, Skye, because we talk about this all the time on this podcast. Everything is a reflection of us. Everything in our external world is a mirror, and it doesn't stop at the law. And so going through these lawful processes can just be an extension of doing the inner work. And I actually wanted to ask you too, because so many people I've heard talk about this, and again, I didn't fully understand until I had my experience, but they often say that going through this is a spiritual experience in and of itself because of the kind of, what you have to go through. So I'd just love for you to speak to that and like in your personal experience, what that was like.
Yeah, like mine's been, like, this is a big one for me because, what I saw. So like I have a friend who's a healer, and she always says she's very good at what she does. She's been headhunted by medical people to try to like tap into what she's doing. She has such amazing results getting people off, depressive medication and things like that. And she says to me, Skye, people always, when they come to me, I ask them, what are your values? What do you stand for? And she said they often don't know. And she goes, there's a problem. We'll start there. And even if you don't know, that's okay, but you need to make a start. And so for me, like, knowing my values and knowing truth, but I was really fortunate to have my dad model something that you rarely see now, and that's conviction. Like that, and my mum too, because she walked by his side. So, they did a journey where I got to sit, and it was almost like to sit and watch that. It was like I was changed by that. And so in my walk, it's put something into me where it's the antidote to apathy. It's the antidote to acquiescence. It's the antidote to, because apathy is evil. Like apathy is evil. And that doesn't mean we get angry, and it doesn't mean but dialing in and reading and getting knowledge. It doesn't matter what field you're interested in. It's like dialing into life, being present, like all these kinds of things. It was like they showed me that was what was sorely needed. And particularly like when you look at family structures, we need men to lead. We need people to do these things. So I had this kind of experience there. And then in my own life, I've had my own values that have created this kind of drive. I don't know if I'm answering your question adequately, but yeah, when you get clear on what your values are, I think then your decisions that come from that will always help to move to that extension.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Well, that conviction is really important, what you're saying about that. When you go and you actually know what you're standing on, you have being grounded. It's like the literal definition of that.
Yeah, I think so we have all these things there that can kind of help us, but if we don't have those elements, so whether you're fighting the traffic ticket or whether you're doing all of these things and you're trying to come into that right resonance, that's so much harder without that foundation, is probably where I was trying to go with it. So you need to have a grounding. You've got to understand what your value system is. So for me, when you talk, Alexis, about these hooks that people can have in your resonance and they can come in, like I had a lot of those because I had a very bad victim mentality, huge victim mentality. I could impersonate myself right now and you'd be dead. Like my former self, So yeah, having to getting into those values, and then once you have that, see, for me, shame no longer, I mean, I had experiences too. This is where I think I was trying to go. I had experiences too in life that called on a lot of judgment, right? Because I won't go into the stories, but, I've had a lot of things with relationships and different scenarios where people have judged me quite harshly, but I've also judged others. Like I'm no angel, and I really look at that now, these programmed responses that sometimes I don't even think they're mine. I'm like, well, where'd that come from? I don't think that's true. So I'm better at not letting these things slide by, but just trying to have a value system that can entrench you so that you hold firm. Because for me now, I'm not ashamed. My priority, if someone was like, oh, this happened to you, or I heard this happened to her, I'd be like, I don't care, because if I care more about what you think about me than my value of truth, I went through something pretty hairy recently, and I'm so proud of it because I got the answer that I wanted. People would look at that situation and be like, oh, what? But in my mind, I wanted knowledge. I wanted truth. I wanted to know if a certain type of law would stand in a certain type of mechanics or methodology. I asked a big question. I got a pretty big answer. But that was my value. So I don't hold any shame around it. I did initially. I was like, oh, is there a little tweak there? Do I need to look at that? And I did. And I was like, why would I be ashamed of that? I did this. And then I was like, that's not my story. That's just everyone else's story that I'm feeling. I'm picking up on that, but that's not my shame. That's secondhand shame. Someone else's that's, but for me, and what happened to me in that particular scenario, internally, and my relationship with my maker through that little period, and the deepening of love and the insight that he gave me through that period, I'm like, man, I wouldn't wish for it again, but I don't regret it. Like I don't regret it. So that's why, sometimes these situations that seem like they're terrible are actually healing us, and they're making us stronger, and they're making us come into the remembrance of who we are before all that garbage hits.
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes in life, the reason we don't take risks, sometimes we are apathetic because it's just safer to be, because the majority of the populace is. We would have seen that through, COVID and some of the groups that we are in now. Like, there is a shared experience sometimes of isolatedness, like of being lonely, like people don't understand your journey. But it's not that they don't. I just think a lot of people can't, because they're on a different resonance. Their value system is about fitting in. Their value system isn't about honesty or authenticity or coming into this realm in this time to live your soul purpose, whatever that looked like, no matter how crazy that is. And I guess I've surrendered now. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't get the picket fence and the regular, but the truth is I would be so bored. Like, honestly, I would be so bored. And I know already that even if I was to go tomorrow, I constantly laugh to Creator about this. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, if I had to go tomorrow, I've lived. Like, I've really lived. I've done some things, and I'm so grateful for that. Like, I feel so much fullness in my heart, so much richness and I'm so much more grateful for my family than I've ever been before, because I wasn't there. I wasn't really paying attention. But that's kind of how I feel the public system gets us. It's just in this like entertainment, eat, sleep, drink, whatever you got to do to try to fill up that void that we all experience. But yeah, there's something about this line of inquiry that I'm on that is just so nourishing, and it is the spiritual aspect. And coming back to my mum and dad, like my dad said to me at the start, that's where I was going with them in their walk. Dad said, Skye, I can't explain it. It's bigger than just the material and what you'll see. This was about a reclamation of who he was and the stories he'd seen growing up. I mean, that man had been he was sent to a boarding school convent at 5 years of age. The dude's got some stories. So to watch him go through that, I get so moved even thinking about it, because he saw a lot of stuff, and for him to walk that out no matter what it costs. And I kept saying, Dad, you've got to live with you. And I'm so proud that he did what was right for him, even though it had, these ramifications in other elements of his life. That's strength. That's courage. That's not, that's like the little turtle like veering off on the EAC and Nemo. I love the turtles that go off on the EAC and Nemo. I'm like, you're a turtle.
I love that. Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head with the apathy, that piece on apathy, because I think that's exactly why the public system has come so out of balance, because people don't want to learn this stuff. It's just too hard. I just rather go along to get along, and they're happy doing that and keeping up with the Joneses. It's that whole, like you said, it's that value system that gets you there. And unfortunately, that's why we've come so out of balance, and we're so overgoverned, especially here in Australia. Like, I remember back in, 2014. So over a decade ago now. When I was at TAFE, I'll never forget one of my TAFE teachers. She used to work in London and for many years, and flew in and out of London and Australia a lot. And she was saying, even back then, she said, we are the most overgoverned country in the world. Like, going through the airport, she would go through Heathrow Airport, one of the busiest airports in the world, nowhere near the amount of security. It's probably changed now, but nowhere near the amount of security that they have in Australia. And it's just gotten worse and worse and worse over time, and especially in the last 5 years. So I think
that goes back to what you were saying about I think this was off camera before, about the governance that we're experiencing here is a reflection somehow of the populace.
Well, I don't know. Do you think that Aussies as a group, I mean, we shouldn't gross generalize, like it's super lazy, but if you have to look at a collective, we are pretty apathetic. We just love beer and pies and footy and stuff, which is all good stuff. I'm not against those things. I love those things too. Not so much pies anymore, but like that whole idea of like just being easygoing. But it's so funny, because now I'm like, well, if you think about an apathetic populace, well, we have to thank these agencies, because they're like, imagine a lawless, apathetic population.
Yeah, right.
That doesn't make sense. So, in a sense, we have to thank the system that it's there doing some governance. And you're right. It's just the fact that you know, we are, you know, it's going too far the other way, but that's also part of us too, going, well, I mean, yeah, we're not paying attention, but we also love to blame each other. Like, that's why, you know, I'm constantly on about insurance. Insurance is all about, like, you did this, no, you did this, no, you did this. You rarely see these days in any conflict people coming through going, shoot, bad situation, really not ideal. Are you okay, mate? Are you okay? How can we make this right? And so with the stuff that I'm, you know, working with at the moment, like things like PMAs and trusts and things, that's what I love about it. It's about watching men and women and, you know, each of us come together and make agreements with a good old Aussie handshake and be like, now I'm going to indemnify you. I know you're going to do the best job you can for me, and I'm going to do the best for you. And we're in an agreement now, and we want to rise to the occasion to make this a great agreement. That's so different to what happens in the licensed, registered, public side of things, where it's all about, now we've got insurance, and if this happens and there's your excess and it's your fault, now I'm going to take you to court. We've just lost the soul of, you know, it's an oxymoron to say that, but we've lost the soul of coming into alignment and agreement together. And that's what the system really loves, because again, the whole overlaying whatever that machine is that's driving everything, if there is, you know, some top tier type deal, well, they love division and conquering. That's how you keep a populace on its knees. So, you know, one of the things that lights my heart up about this other side is that we get to work together, and then we get to look at ugly stuff, because if you do come into an agreement with a brother or a sister and then it doesn't go well, then you've got to look at your own internal stuff. If you're doing your job properly, okay, well, what's mine to own, and looking at myself and my responsibility first before I reach out to that person. That's a whole different level of, you know, accountability. But if we each brought that to the table, could you imagine the earth? Like, could you imagine like, oh my goodness, I think I've made a mistake or I've harmed you. How can I make this right? This is my capacity. What could I do to heal this, to make this better for you? Like, that's the world that I sort of envisage. And it, you know, maybe it just has to happen with small steps till eventually we get the shits with that system. This overreach could be a really good thing, because eventually people are going to have to get so squeezed. When I'm now no longer apathetic, this is enough. Like, so now I do want to find the way. Everyone has a pain point, and my pain points for me have always been the things that have led to incredible trajectories of change. So, you know, I'm sort of sitting here with a bit more objective lens about the public system, going, well, yeah, I mean, there are elements to it that are extremely unethical, but we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because we're just not there yet.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if they did throw the baby out with the bathwater, the amount of chaos and violence and insanity, the cartels and the drugs or the criminal elements would rise first. And that's happened. It's happened so many times when the governance fails in a country, in Mexico and different places, in Zimbabwe and Rwanda and the genocides and shit. It's not always, you know, there is some element of influence from some of these things. Like Rwanda, for instance, was the Belgians creating a separate caste system. And then there's repercussions for that. But the people are the ones that drive a lot of the things that governments kind of get blamed for, because the governments are made out of the people. And I keep saying this, and some people push back to it, but I keep saying the people that are governing the populace are a reflection of the general populace, because that's what people will tolerate. That's what they will stand for. Whether or not the voting structure is actually real and who you vote for actually gets in, but it's what people will tolerate and stand for. I'm not sure if the revolution in the States was real the way that we're told or not, but there's some element of that where people stood up and they said, no, we're responsible for this continent. Like what we're doing here, we're going to name it our own thing. We're going to create, and, you know, and they did to some degree of truth and verity with that. But I think it's so important to take responsibility. Like you were saying, if you keep putting off the, you know, responsibility to the government, oh, they're doing this to us, they're doing to us, you're punching yourself in the face, and you should stop.
I know, right? Like I was talking to someone about speaking somewhere, and I was like, you know, I would just like get up there and be like, guys, you might want to leave now, because I don't have the like, I'm not going to give the sentiments that you want to hear potentially in this forum, because I've had to, like I said, I've done things and I wanted to learn, but I've also done things where I'm like, yes, Guy, come on, like, grow up. And that's where I see, like I said, it's all good to move through those things, but I agree with you 100%. The change, the body politic is a reflection of the populace that has allowed it to come in. And, whether there isn't, a perspective that, well, there was no disclosure and there was no this and there was no this. This is true. These elements, I think, are true. And yet we also slumbered, and we're still slumbering because, some of the work I'm doing at the moment, like when people talk about this, public estate or the birth certificate trust or however people refer it to, it's like, okay, well, you want this benefit or you want these rights. Are you prepared to actually step up and administrate that thing? Like, are you prepared, because it's a business, are you prepared to come in and do business and all that goes with that? And if people saw what that looked like, and I'm not telling you I have the answers on what that looked like, I'm just working through my own stuff, but I'm like, this has been my big realization recently, the amount of like life essence and energy that I'm putting into showing up in a new way. I'm like, man, I don't think this is for many people at all. Like the amount of effort, like I can see now why the system's there, because everyone can crack on and do this, this and this and, do stuff with life. But if you really want to come in and, like I said, it's like, rights equals divine jurisprudence. There's the balance. If you want, this access, well, that comes with your maturity in knowing how to do it. And I'm not saying I have the answer on that, but that's where I want to go now. I want to be so commercially astute that it's a different position that I'm filling. That's all it is. I'm not going to fight with anybody. I'm just going to pursue truth, which is to do certain things in the spirit of truth in a way that is non-confrontational. But I will put in the hours, because spiritually for me, what I have learned through certain things recently, I know it, but I just never had it framed this way. But I had this framing that didn't really land with me until just this week, because I was like, what are the chances? And I'm a bit of this thing that I'm working on. And I was like, I'm a bit of a Lloyd, from Dumb and Dumber, when he's like asking Mary Swanson if she'll go on a date. And she's like 1 in a million, and he doesn't realize it's not good odds. And he's like, there's a chance. I have a lot of Lloyd in me, right? But I'm sitting there and I'm going that there's Lloyd, and I'm like, yeah, there's a chance. But then I had this revelation that occurred last year, was about, when you put in something like say a bond or something, it's like you're putting in an earnest pledge. And I was like, man, Creator put his earnest pledge in me. He put his earnest deposit, the breath of life, into me. So for me, it's no longer about anything other than honoring that, because I've walked through life with his essence in me, and I've just given so much away. Give. I've just abandoned all of my things in commerce. I've just walked through completely untrained in this element, which, it's designed that way. Institutionalized education doesn't want us to know how money works or how any of these functions. That's on purpose, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean that I can't do better. So I'm like, I'm no longer attached to an outcome. For me, I had this beautiful softening and surrender that, you know what, you did this, you put this in me, and I have to honor that by claiming what I have expelled into the sphere, because that's worth something. So that's been a big shift, like an even bigger shift in my journey of dropping my anger and dropping my fear, and now being like, no, like I don't care what anyone does with it. I'm just going to tell the truth. That's it. And it can land wherever it lands. But I had this beautiful moment where I was interacting with, somebody, and the thing was that the work that we have the opportunity to do is intergenerational now. Like when we really dial into that deposit that was placed in each of us, and the incredible potent ability we have in this now moment to make change for the unborn, the unsung, all of the ones to come, it's like, oh, I have no attachment other than to do something better, whether that means creating a different type of music or homeschooling your kids or doing any of these things. It's just like, that's a really beautiful place to be in, because that to me feels like the seed of creation now, as opposed to this thing of like, oh, the system's against me and I've got to do this. And
Right.
it's like, and that's also the energy of a true creditor. A true creditor, because we've been tricked that we're the debtor and we're the surety and all these things, but a true creditor doesn't argue and piss and moan. They just do their process and let it speak, and then they just go about their life again. Like, that's, you know, learning to not justify, because I've been a rabid justifier. Like, I've got to defend, I've got to. So there's huge layers that can come off by being open to this kind of work. But it is also very overwhelming, because I still now have cognitive dissonance, and I have, you know, certain checkers that I'll have to go to. I'm like, okay, I'm feeling like I'm losing my mind. And it's like, no. It's just weird, because it's not the norm, you know, these sorts of ideas. But
Yeah.
yeah.
How much are people actually using the PMAs for enterprises that you're seeing? Are people being able to navigate that fairly easily?
Yeah, I see a lot of people doing it really, really well. You know, like, they're understanding the balance, because the balance is that obviously if you're not doing a business in the public, then you need very good governance, you know, on the private side. Because again, you can't just set up a business and be like, oh, you know, well, I've got no laws now, bugger off, you can't touch me. It's all about creating organizations that are legitimate and well-founded. But there's people doing things really, really well, and it's creating a lot of new life in projects, I think, because one thing that I hear on the public side is that, you know, people have these great ideas, and then they put, you know, obviously that's your creation. So you have the idea and it's all chaos, and then you've got to put a structure around it, which is a business. And then the business goes into the public, and all of a sudden you're just, the amount of licensing and all of the fees, everything's fee. Every taxable event is just sucking the life out of that project. And so no one's opposed to paying taxes. No one's opposed to settling their obligations in principle. Like, there's a lot of people that don't want to pay tax, but there's a difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. But, you know, like, the idea is that people still want to contribute, you know, and but it's very difficult. You see businesses, I mean, we saw it during COVID, businesses getting squeezed out when people couldn't trade. But I think even out of that scenario, there's so many businesses that are struggling to function. And then isn't it funny how we kind of lost that ability just to go and sew a few designer handkerchiefs and sell them to old mate down the road, and, you know, like, I don't know why I came up with designer handkerchiefs. That was weird.
Or big elaborate coffee cups.
I actually love that mug. It's so beautiful.
It's got flamingos on it. Yeah,
I love it.
That's my sister's size of coffee mug. She's like, I only drink 1 cup a day, and it's like,
well, I have 2, and it's still not big enough. But yeah.
Well, I love that. Yeah, I love that we're talking about PMAs now, and I'd love for anyone new to this stuff, like, can you give an overview of, like, so PMAs, that's just short for Private Members Association, but then there's also foundations, which are a little bit different, and then we've got trusts as well, and that's, like you said, you're doing a lot of work in this area, and a lot of people are starting to create these things now for their businesses, for their families. So can you give an overview, or maybe like the differences between, like, maybe just the 3 I mentioned?
And which one can I get really wealthy with?
I don't know. I'll let you know if I get there. No, I think that, well, so I haven't done a lot with foundations. So a lot of the foundations that I saw being done were done really well from what I can see. But that was sort of a bit before my time. Like, there was a big push for that, I think, during sort of COVID and things. But I haven't really gone down that avenue or that style of organisation. The one that I would look at is just a PMA through a certain type of unincorporated type structure. But basically what it does is, it's like any association or organisation. You can come together in agreement to learn things, to do things together, and to, you know, donate to that club or to that association for the benefit of those services, if it's educational, if it's, you know, certain types of skills offerings, those sorts of things. But really what it's about is that you come together with agreements and contracts, and, you know, in law, the contract essentially creates the jurisdiction of the law. So if men and women come together in those private agreements under certain types of structures, well, then they have the ability to trade that way. And there's some really interesting high court there's an interesting high court ruling. It was in the 50s, I think it was. It was the mental blank. It was the Communist Party. So I think the Commonwealth was trying to disband the Communist Party, and they won a high court case saying that they had the right to associate. So if you look at the United Nations Charter, we all have the right to associate. We all have the right to gather. We all have the right to come together by private agreement to do things outside of any license, registration, or public forum. So really what it's about is being clear in your undertaking what the club's about, what its altruistic purpose is, and why it's there to support the endeavours of a community. So that is a really beautiful body of work to look at, because it's a big mental shift. Because like I said, it takes us back to more like where my dad was operating. You know, old mate rocks up to the yards. He has a look at dad's sheep. Yep, pretty happy with them. I'll do this. And he's like, oh, by the way, can I pay this? And I wouldn't mind a silo of grain, or I'll give you a silo of grain. And, you know, you're in a private agreement now. Versus if he was trading with one of the grain corps or something like that. Very commercial, very corporate. So this is helping people understand the traditional or the more ancient practices of private trade. The trust work is really helpful as well as a learning vehicle, because it teaches you to stop abandoning claims. So when you learn to create a trust, it's about, you know, obviously who's the grantor, who's putting in the res, the collateral, the property, who's going to be the trustee or the custodian of it, and who's going to benefit from that contractual arrangement. It's basically an agreement. And so when people start to work through the trust process, a lot of people will already have it. Say they'll have an accountant that set up a trust for a company, or, you know, different things that they've got operating in the private. But oftentimes with those situations, people aren't learning what's happening because they've just outsourced it to the accountant, and they don't get to really drive or put their energy into the construction of that particular entity. And there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with public trusts. And I know people that do really amazing stuff with public trusts that have all sorts of protective mechanisms. So not everything in the public is bad. Like, there's some really great provisions there. It's just that doing a private trust process helps people start to go, oh man, like, I'm the grantor, or and this is the trustee. And you start to look at the positions in different types of commercial relationships or contractual relationships. And then you start to look at your property and you start to realize, well, I've abandoned that. I never claimed that. Because what happened is the ens legis, or the straw man, the all caps name, has all of this public title sitting attached to that. But then you've got the living being over here, and the living being shows up to work. The living being's doing all the energy input, but the fiction holds all this title. So there's this kind of disjoint, and it's like, hang on, the woman's not getting paid. What's going on here? Like, because I'm not that thing. So it's just teaching people to understand more about the mechanics, and then learn how to start making their claims. Like, yeah, that's mine, and I'm going to create an agreement there. So it's a shift in this, the families that are at the top echelons, they know this stuff inside out and back to front.
Yeah.
This stuff was built, it comes from the papal bulls. It's been around since the dawn of time. And, in medieval times or ancient times, the knights would go away to fight. So they would, have to put their castle into the safe holding of somebody because they didn't know what was going to happen. So they would give the title to the trustee, and oftentimes, they would come back from war and then they'd try to take their ownership of their castle back, and the trustee had all the power. They're like, nah, man, like, I'm the title holder now. So, understanding the history of trusts and how they've worked, if they came down from the papal bulls essentially, then they were put in for a certain reason to benefit certain parties, but we just haven't really known how to make them benefit us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole thing about the system, which I find super interesting, is that anything is a double-edged sword. If something's created for one portion of society, well, then how can it not be for the other portion? But that's where the education part comes in, that if you put people into institutionalized education where they learn a whole bunch of stuff they're never going to need. Like we don't get taught taxation. We don't get taught money mechanics. We don't really even understand what money is. Like,
we don't get taught about the economy.
Well, they don't have the vocabulary for it. And I wanted to pause just for a second and point out to our listeners, there's a lot of words here that I'm not familiar with, but that's this vocabulary. I can't stress that enough. I learned that from Robert Kiyosaki. If you want to change your life, if you want to change your money situation, your relationship situation, whatever, learn a new vocabulary. When your mind expands, it never goes back to the same size it was when you started. And this vocabulary here, I think, is going to create a foundation, help create a foundation for immense freedom and personal power through responsibility.
Yeah, but it's liberating. Like I'm a real geek now because the shift that I get, like I had certain resistances to certain commercial things. I'm not going to name what they are, but I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't like, and then I was like, in 2025, I'm making this one commercial thing. Like I'm going to make it my bitch. Like I'm just going to absolutely come in and I'm going to dominate. Like that was just a decision I made, and I made it because of the resistance I had to it. I was like, if I have so much resistance to this, it's probably because there's something in it. Like otherwise it just wouldn't matter. So I'm forcing myself to sit, because particularly when you start this type of journey, what I experienced was I would look at stuff and my mind would shut down. And so to your point, Isaac, we're learning 2 new languages. We're learning, because legal language is a complete, like etymologically, it's a complete bastardization of true language or the intent of a lot of language. So legalese is very, very difficult to interpret, and that's not an accident. And then you're trying to learn commercial language. So the way I look at it and what I say to people is, think about learning a different language, Japanese, anything, Italian, whatever. Be kind to yourself and just go, yep, I'm learning a new language. And I have it still happen to me where I'll read something and I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, it's okay. You're learning a new language. And I just say to my mind, let's find the synaptic connections. It'll take a little bit of repetition till it gets in there. But the more you sit with something, the more it lands. And it just, like, I feel strongly in my heart, I'm not telling people what to do and I'm not saying that you have to do this, but I feel for me, if I don't do this, because my dad, like I said, he short-tracked it for me and he could put a lot of things into layman terms and he could really condense stuff. If I can't do that for my kids, then I don't feel like I'm being a very good steward, because, it's all about trying to make things, in some respects, not all respects, easier for the next generation as they face more of what all the generations allowed to happen. So it's got to be like this big pendulum swing, because otherwise these guys are going to have a harder battle than what we've got. So that's where the shift is. And I just tell myself that, I have to understand this to a certain degree to be able to actually help them understand what's going on in their lives. But what I find when I break through is, like, this is actually not that hard. I really want to say this. The only blocker to understanding this scenario or this system is that we have been indoctrinated or educated to the lowest echelon. Like, really, we have been created as good workers. That's what the education system does. That's why my next venture is 100% about homeschooling, because I see that we can have a greater effect when we go back and get the kids with the synaptic connections. Joe Dispenza reckons, like, what is it? 90% of you is programmed by the age of 35. So, I take my hat off to people in their 50s and 60s. I'm in my 40s, older than that actually have gone back to do this, because that's a tall order. But I think that's the awakening as well, that we go, okay, this is hard. We don't really understand it, but we're going to stay open, just staying open to it so that things can slowly come in. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking that earlier as you were talking about, like, the stuff we're doing now, like how it's intergenerational. And that's what really excites me as well, because I'm totally on board with that. Like, I feel like we need to learn this stuff so that we can teach it to our kids, because if they're just learning that from really young ages, they're just going to get it. Like, by the time they're our age, they're just going to know it like the back of their hand. So I think that is so, so important.
I don't want to bring it too far back, but we talked about the victim status, and that people need to really watch out for that, because I hear that with taxes, oh, it's corrupt or whatever. there's a lot of ways to legally pay no taxes, and it's written in the system and it's written for us, but we're oblivious to it. And the same thing with the trust law and everything else. People are complaining about the death tax and all this stuff. With trust, I don't know the exact details in Australia, but in the States, I think it's still going now. You can avoid all the taxes on death tax using trusts. And that was something that Trump changed in his first presidency. So there's a lot of different things that are benefiting people that are out there, but people still have these walls up and they see these headlines, and the headlines are always there to trigger and reinforce to keep people in that fear, in that helplessness, in that victim status. So you really got to watch that.
Yeah, and there's an element there too. Like, I'm just going to call it, this could be like your most unpopular one ever, but I'm just going to say this because this is really on my heart, is like, there's a lot of grabbiness. So, you know, like you talk to people and they go, oh, you know, I always say to people, what's your goal? Like, you know, what if you can like create more abundance, right, by getting a little bit more control over your earnings, what are you going to do with that? Because if you're not happy with the tax system, what they're spending the money on, which, I mean, we don't know at the end of the day, right? Like, could be going to some things we don't know about. We don't know. We just can't know. So, but if you're not happy with that, and then you were in this situation here, what's your vision for uplifting your community? Because that's what a benevolent business is all about. And there's no forethought to, because I'm like, well, you know, how are you going to take that saved tax dollar theoretically, hypothetically, entertainment purposes only? How would you take that and how would you place that into the parts of your community that you would want to pay your taxes to? Because divine jurisprudence again says we don't not pay tax. We might want to control where it goes, but we should always be contributing to our community. We should always be uplifting others. So that's what I love about PMAs, is that you get to choose more about which brothers or sisters benevolent business that you make donations into. If you've got someone that's trying to start up a community association, go donate. That's paying tax. You know, that's what tax is designed to do, is to uplift, theoretically, uplift the public good. So if you're going to save here, then what's your vision for uplifting the public good? And they're like, oh, hadn't thought about it. I'm like, come on. I don't really want to work with people like that. I just don't. It doesn't feel like where we're meant to be going, because the system that we're in, we got here because of materialism. And don't get me wrong, I like nice things. Like, I'm not saying I'm like, you know, trading for the, you know, potato sack in my like things yet. But
Right.
I'm just saying, like, you know, you know, there's nothing wrong with having worldly possessions, but the whole, like you said earlier on, keeping up with the Joneses and these ideas of that again, our values, that is a value above all else. That is the mentality that brought this system in. So it's like, if you want something different, you have to do something different. And so if you want to stop paying tax here, where are you going to put that? I don't know. Okay, sorry. Like, I don't want to be aligned with energy like that. That's just, you know, my position on it. But I think as a collective, and I've had to look at these things in myself too, as a collective, we have to be reflecting on all of that, because it's all of the energy. And I don't think it's all ours. I mean, this is, you know, generations. We watched our parents, our grandparents. This is something that's happened since, you know, Babylonian times, but enough's enough, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I love that. I love the way you said that. And yeah, for people that are like that, check out at that and they're like, well, then I'm out of here. It's like, good, see ya. Because the phrase popped into my head, you know, Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, but with great responsibility comes great power. Yeah. But for the people that are power hungry and they just want to have power, and then they shirk the responsibility of like, all right, I'm actually going to take my income and think about how I can benefit the whole community with it. Not all of it. We don't have to be totally altruistic. Like I'm all about creating healthy and aligned and expanding things by doing the right activities over and over again and expanding it into multiple businesses, multiple investments, multiple things, just doing more of it. That's nature. Like, we live in a jungle out here. It's constantly growing, and I want my business to be like that. But if you're reinvesting into your community and you're giving power, like a mom that wants to set up a homeschool hub and have like training courses, I'd rather pay for that than have my taxes go pay a public school system to teach them about what they put in their bum, you know? It's obvious.
That's right? Like, or fun libraries that are having readings by all sorts of unique characters. Like, I totally get what you're saying. Or funding wars. Like, I mean, I'm not saying that happens. I don't know. But it's just like sometimes you think it looks that way, right? So, you know, that's what, again, I think the whole thing is about. It doesn't matter whether it's law or any of these things. If you're not having a vision that is in a new way, then we're just going to keep compounding the problem and then keep complaining about it, which is the victim cycle. So it takes radical shift, radical responsibility, radical self-reliance. And I'm telling you, like with my mentality that I had, if someone had spoken to me about these things, I would have been super ouchy. Like, you don't know. Like, but it's like, well, how's it working out for you? You know? And that's the questions that I had to start asking myself. Okay, big girl, like, how's that working out? And I was like, oh, okay, well, come here, boogeyman, let's sit and have a chat. And, you know, that's sort of stuff's not easy, but the sense of freedom and the releasing of those bondages, because victimhood is a shackle. It's the biggest shackle I can perceive or sense. Maybe there's bigger ones, but you know, that's, you know, huge. I share those things just through my learnings. I'm not trying to preach. I'm just speaking as I would speak to myself, because the release in my body, in my woman, in my being, off the back of my shoulders at having seen this and seeing there's a way out, and it's not going to be an easy one, because again, a pendulum swing is never easy. But I do think we're at a potent time, because you know, people go on about millennials all the time and how they're, you know, entitled, and there's all sorts of narratives that come out. Every generation gets a different narrative. But one of the things that I love about them, you know, my daughter's 23 and she just calls stuff out so hardcore. Like they don't seem to have some of the hang-ups that I had, like generationally. So I love it. Like initially when I was trying to, you know, mother her, I'm like, oh, this is very ouchy. Like I've got a very strong personality here. But she's the best, because she's just like, nut. And she's like, you know, Mum, when she was going through high school, she really struggled with anxiety. And you know, we tried everything. And then just now she's really coming into her own as a woman. And she's like, Mum, I see there was nothing wrong with me. The school system was so out of alignment for what I needed to feel good and that I could thrive. And I'm like, baby, you've got it. And so now she wants to go back and she wants to learn skills so that she can go into a homeschool setting and she can be part of that change. So some of these millennials, they've come in with all this attitude for a purpose. And I think that's to support the pendulum swing, which probably has to, you know, start with us, and then you can move back down the line. That's just my theory or what I sense. But it's actually really cool that these kids are not taking garbage, because I'm probably, you know, I'm older than you guys, but I bought into a lot of garbage that was not mine.
We all have, I think, regardless of age. I feel like we're pretty much the same generation. Isaac's close in age to you, but yeah, we all have. And I think this is why they call it the quote unquote Great Awakening, is because I don't think in the history that we know of, I don't think we've ever seen a time like this where so much of the population is becoming aware of all of this subconscious programming, all of the conditioning, all of the stuff that we just never questioned. Like people just never questioned it for generation after generation after generation. And so this is a huge time for those shifts. And I'm so excited for this next generation and what they're doing. I think that all of us here on Earth at this particular point in time, I think we're really pivotal in the shifts that are happening and that are to come. And so, so this, like, I mean, even just this topic that we're talking about is super exciting too, because I think we are starting to see this shift in people taking responsibility in that area. Your mum's just gone through the process to create a trust, and just seeing her go through it. And again, it's difficult. Like she's tearing her hair out a lot of the time. But then she does it and then she's like, oh, yeah, I understand that now. I get it. And it's like the more people do that and then can teach the next generation. And because she said to me, because we want to do the same thing, and she said, yeah, I'll help you go through the process. And then it just spreads. It's a ripple effect.
It is. It's a ripple effect for sure. And it is. It's amazing watching. Like, it was so cool seeing your mum, and you could tell she was like, oh, you know, when I was over there earlier on. And yeah, and that sense of like accomplishment in herself, because, you know, like you can always keep learning. Like, your brain is just, it's like muscle memory. That's just the physical part of it that I love too. It's like, I don't fear getting any type of like mental, you know, declining as I get older, because my brain hasn't stood a chance. You know, like, yeah, get back online. You got no hope of going missing in action, you know, like keeping ourselves stimulated and engaged. And that's really what life's about. Like, it's all good to chill and watch a movie and that kind of thing. But knowledge is so nourishing. Maybe this is just me. Maybe I'm a crackpot, but knowledge.
No, I agree.
Because I was feeling a void. Like, when knowledge is stolen or it's hidden or it's concealed, there was something in me that I just felt like this void. But now I see that it's always been there. It's just that we've had this thing pulled over, you know? So, yeah, it's amazing to see people. And it doesn't matter where people want to take it. Some people are like, no, I'm happy with the system as it is, but I want to learn a bit of this. Great. Because you're just learning something new that can give you context and give you options. I'm all about options, right? Like, when we stop having options, or that's really why you would want to stand in the law. It's not that no one wants to really follow it or we all want to be renegades. It's just that we want to understand it so that we can always protect ourselves and keep ourselves safe in instances where the law may not be wired legally to do that. So, you know, it's amazing to see people taking up any type of challenge. And even if it is going into court over a ticket, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just like, I see in myself, I could have used all of that energy in other ways. But at the time, I didn't know that. So at the time, it was the right thing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about, and I don't want to start internet drama, but I'm just curious about Brother Truth. And I like a lot of what he's saying, but I also question some of it with, like, in the regards of like discharging debt. So you go out and you buy a Maserati and then discharge the debt with the intention of doing that. I don't know. Is that ethical? I don't know.
You're talking about some of the content out there now that's teaching people how to do it?
Yeah, he's referencing a particular guy in the States who
I know who you're at. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a fan of him just because, irrespective of what he's saying, he's getting cogs turning. Okay. Now, I don't know really out there who's a shill, who's not. Like, there's a lot of debate about all these different things. I just don't really weigh in, because really I'm on my own path, and I've learned, at the end of the day, all I can trust is myself, because that's self-accountability. I can't put it on anyone else. But if in relation to that question, I think what I would probably say is, my guess is it would be like the reflection thing. If you want to go out and do a certain thing, but you don't fundamentally yet embody your earnest pledge of creator, that you are the creditor and what that looks like in a commercial sense. So you're just going in there to do a thing based on what somebody else says, but you haven't arrived because you haven't walked that path through. That may be problematic. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm seeing is tick and flicks and certain things, because you've got substance and form. And I never understood this. A beautiful woman in the States talked about this years ago. She does some beautiful work, and she was talking about substance and form. So she was talking about you've got paperwork and it says one thing, but you've got your energy, you've got your spirit, you've got your sentience. The paperwork without the substance is nothing really. Like, the paperwork helps your substance speak, but it's not the bigger part. The bigger part is your energy and your knowing. You know, it's a bit like, so when you've got people that are going in, and again, intention's everything. So my intention is that I want to get something without giving something, then that's not equity. Now, I'm not saying you can't discharge the car by giving something, but if you just want to go in and do something and grab something, then I don't know that it's going to work. I haven't seen his process, but I wouldn't be wanting to do it that way myself.
Yeah. I like that. Just point out, I just clicked, fill out this form. They have you fill out a form, and that's what you're talking about. It's crazy. But on the Brother Truth thing, I'm not against the guy at all. I like When he explains it, it kind of starts to make sense, but a lot of it still's over my head. But being African American, I like that he's appealing to that crowd, to that group of people that have a lot of energy. And when they really get in touch with their substance and they start shaking the trees and they start like, shaking things up and calling for change, things do tend to change.
Yeah. And I just want to mention too, like that population of people in the States are, I think, quite often the most quote unquote victimized and that are stuck in that victim mentality. And what I love about Brother Truth, because we listened to that episode on the way forward and I was like, I love this guy, like good on him. But yeah, I'm with you, Skye. I'm like, would I go through that process? Probably not. There's something in me that it wouldn't feel right for me to do that at this point in time. It might change. But what I love about what he preaches is that I think the stuff that he talks about gets people to see what's actually possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing.
It is. Yeah. The cogs turning is important because irrespective of whether people do something with that or not, and I just realized I thought you were talking about somebody else. So it's not, so I haven't seen his content, to be fair. But anyone that provokes thought, is, to me, like, I think it's great because, and sometimes if it's, controversial or whatever, people can tap into that easier, right? Because we're a little bit wired that way. But I think to get people seeing what's possible, because these things all are possible. In fact, I think it's how the system was designed to actually work. That was the equity that was supposed to be coming our way. But I just, it's a bit like when I was going through that thing all those years ago where I talked about spending all that energy. Someone close to me was like, Skye, you're a white belt trying to do Aikido moves. And I'm like, yeah, fair. So that's the element that I caution people. To say any of these guys, it's good to listen. And when someone's ready to dial in and try something, they'll know in their body anyway. Like, I feel really called to do this, whether I'm going to have a good result or a learning, then,
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And just because you've mentioned it a couple of times, and I did kind of want to get into this just a little bit, but so equity and trust law, they're under the same umbrella, right? Is that correct? Yeah, or are they a little bit different?
There's under the, international, I think it's the International Manual for Commercial something, I forget the title of the book. It's a very old US-based book, but they kind of categorize law in 4 general areas. So you've got common law, you've got equity law, international law, and law merchant. Those are your 4 kind of overarching things. And for a long time, I was trying to understand the difference really between equity and trust law. But trust law essentially is contract law because you're going into an agreement, you're forming an agreement with parties, and there's value and consideration. So trust law theoretically has all of the components of commercial law. So I kind of tend to see trust law in that way now, although under different trust can exist under many jurisdictions at varying levels. So there's that element, and then equity is more about say you have you've got a commercial dispute. So the contract itself and the execution of the contract is in some form of dispute. So we would look at the turn of events and what had happened in that commercial dispute. But then equity comes in as kind of the nuance to help make both parties whole. So equity to me is kind of like it's maxims. It's a set of premises that speak to righteous dealing and good faith dealing. So you've got the commercial mechanics, and the way I view it, and there could be lawyers who are like, oh my gosh, she's totally botched that. But the way that my mind looks at it is that what is the commercial scenario? And now when we're looking at the intention of the parties and all the things that influence the exchange, how is, was that, contract executed in good faith? Did the parties have clean hands? Those are all the elements of equity that come through. But equity also provides a lot of provisions for restitution. So, there's a lot of things in equity law that people don't really know are available to them. If they get themselves into trouble in a contract, that has provisions to help make, again, parties whole. So, sometimes dealing with corporate agencies, there's not always adequate disclosure. And the reason for that is that they're quite protected, like they're indemnified, and there's a lot of protections for big corporate structures to not really have to disclose in good faith. You're talking about a massive machine dealing with, old mate here. So there's a huge power imbalance in contracting. It's not the same as shaking a dude's hand and being like, yep, that's a really good, solid deal. Oftentimes there's things happening behind the scenes that aren't disclosed to the regular man or woman, person, Ensley, just whatever you want to call it. So, that's problematic. And there's supposed to be, different types of consumer laws and things that protect that. But ultimately there's an uneven balance. And so there are provisions through equity to assist people to, kind of counter that if if we know how to apply them and what the circumstances are. So each kind of thing comes in to have a bearing. But at the end of the day, whatever it is that you are dealing with is a contract, and it's either an express contract, one that you willingly signed up for, even if you didn't have all the information at hand, or it can be an implied contract. So I didn't sign that contract, but someone else did for me. So I'm in a kind of a, and there's all sorts of adhesion contracts and things that are playing out. So, when you trace each interaction back, there's a contract sitting there somewhere, whether it's kind of a silent, quiet, sneaky one, or whether it's a forthright, yep, I went and did that.
Just on the contracts, how important is it, would you say, for in the private, let's say a PMA, and you're interacting with people to have written contracts? Because I feel like a few people that I've seen go into the private and do things all willy-nilly, like, so to speak, just making agreements verbal. And then when shit goes south, there's no written contract, and there's no control. It's just chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that happens a lot because, and I'm just going to speak from experience here, because when we move into that beautiful new way of being, we can have a lot of emotion, like, oh, this is beautiful and it's so free and it's great. And then you find that you need an agreement or a contract, just like you had on that side, because emotion can cloud commercial interactions, or not commercial in the sense of, private agreements, but private agreements, because people go into things with good intent and the best intention. Oftentimes agreements are like, oh yeah, swings and roundabouts, but then people start measuring, well, hang on, that roundabout was worth this and that swing was worth that. So for me now, I don't think anyone would ever want to date me, because I'd be like, right, you're great, but we need to have an agreement. Okay? And no, and this is as much about obligating myself as it is about obligating you. And that agreement is really about, again, not binding anybody or being weird about it, although I can't imagine anyone wanting to do that. But what it's about is that if you establish an agreement, you're establishing alignment in values. Because if you think about it, if I want to make an agreement with you, Alexis, and you're like, oh, no way, well, then we're not aligned. But if you're like, yeah, look, that looks really good, and, I think we need this in there, Skye, to protect you. Like, now when you have someone say in an agreement, look, let's just put this in because I want to protect you, and now you're talking with someone who's coming in a lot of good faith. That's the kind of man or woman that you want to make an agreement with. But the agreement could be such that, like, well, if our relationship doesn't go very well, or we start having problems, how are we going to mitigate this? How are we going to do it so it doesn't get heated? How are we going to do it so that if there are kids involved, this happens? So things like prenuptials and those sorts of things have become very like, oh, prenup. But I see now that any interaction we do is an agreement. Whether it's love, whether it's family, whether it's whatever, it all has the basis of agreement, which means what are the values, what are the conditions, what are the boundaries? And I actually see now that there's something beautiful in doing that, because when you don't, it gets emotional because you've got no anchor. When you sit down and you go, okay, well, we promised each other this. I'm like really mad at you and like shit's pretty hectic. But let's just have a look at what we said when we felt better. Let's just go back to that piece of paper as much as we don't want to. There's going to be a huge energetic shift, that comes with that of like, man, we said that. We promised each other that. And I don't know that that's going to be the solution in the end, because you can't account for people's states of mind or how strongly they feel about things, but at least you've got something. Whereas if you don't have any agreement or some sort of vision for a worst case scenario, then you've got nothing to fall back to. It's just emotional. It's like here, here, and here. So I went through a process of being very adverse to contracts and agreements, and I now see a lot of beauty in them. And I've, spoken to people recently and they were like, oh, we don't need an agreement. I'm like, Trust me, you want an agreement. I said, it's flowers and it smells beautiful now. And it's lovely. And I think it's going to continue that way. I promise you it'll probably continue that way. But just in case it doesn't, let's do this. And then you feel safe anyway because you checked in with that other party that there was alignment, because that's the problem. At the end of the day, it all comes down to alignment, and when I'm talking to certain individuals now, I'm like, does that feel good for you? I always like to ask that question because sometimes things don't feel good to people and they don't feel like they can voice it. And so you say, well, I only want that from you if that feels good to you. If it doesn't feel good, I'd like you to say it. That level of resonance and forthcomingness and good faith, that is so difficult to find. And that's what I would love to see for the future, the generations ahead, because then for that portion of society that does feel very victimized, they have something to look to. Like they can see people out in the world that do life like this and be like, well, it doesn't have to be that way. We start to create examples where people are like, oh, that feels good. I love the individuals that I'm interacting with in different capacities where it's like, how are you going? Is everything good? Like anything to raise? Like, and it doesn't always go perfectly, but that's such a pendulum swing from what I've always experienced in, particularly in the corporate world, like where you see a lot of competition and backbiting and it's like that's how you start to break down some of those patterns. But that's an abundance mindset too, right? Like I don't have to cling to everything because clinging's lack. So once you start to go, well, no, even if I can't see it now, there's enough for everybody so we can come forward in that way. I 100% would. And the agreement could be 2 points. This is how we deal with conflict resolution. We want time apart or we want to do whatever. And then you can quite calmly say to each other, but that's what we agreed on. So,
yeah. And I think I love that point on agreements because I think this is why learning this stuff is such a huge paradigm shift, because even just that point on agreements is, I think that a lot of the way we've been societally conditioned is to accept a top-down control structure where we're just told what to do and we go, okay, and we just accept it. And then there's also, like, I also see in that there's kind of like this people pleaser side, which is huge in definitely in the Western population of people, where they, again, just sort of acquiesce because, I don't want to, don't want to rock the boat, don't want to say anything, don't really want to express how I really feel. And I love the example that you used about relationships, because Isaac and I often talk about this in our relationship and why it's so different to all of our previous relationships is that we did make agreements very early on about what we expected for our relationship and with each other. And for us, it was always about, like, first and foremost, it was about us doing our own inner work, inner healing, all of that. That would always come first, and looking after ourselves, and then bringing that to the relationship. And just having that foundation is so different. I'm speaking for both of us now from all of our previous relationships, because just now speaking from my personal experience, all of my previous relationships I just fell into. There was no conscious choice. There was no agreements made. And then when the conflicts arise, you've got, like you said, you've got nothing to fall back on. And so that's why I think it's this huge paradigm shift, because people can start looking at these things as, well, how can I apply this really practically in my life? It might not have to be a business contractual agreement. It might just start with your personal relationships. And that can be such a huge shift for people.
Oh, I think it's the best place to start practicing. Like before you do a PMA, if you can nail that stuff in your family, then you're well on your way for a PMA, because the thing is you will have things come up that you've got to deal with. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I'm amazing at it. Like I still have things that happen every now and again where I'm like, oh, that's really ouchy. It's really prickly. And I might have to like just vomit up my, nonsense, like my ego for a bit. And then I'm like, okay, calm down, work this out in my mind. And then we can start to like interact again. I'll start to interact again and go, okay, that's all self-regulation, because we're not, again, it's worse with women, right? For us, I shouldn't say with women. It's worse for us for the programming that women get in the people-pleasing thing, because everyone likes nice, smiling girls, good girls. So we're carrying a lot of that from very early childhood, girlhood. And then, and then you go through the competition type thing, and there's a lot of assumption and presumption. We are not very good at sitting in our vulnerability. So you know, for us to actually say, me to say, you know, Alexis, I'm feeling fearful right now that you might not honor our agreement, right? I'm going to assume and presume you're doing the worst by me because I have fear that you're going to do something wrong by me, you know, and then you have the opportunity to step forward and go, oh, babe, no, like, sorry, if I was being vacuous, that's not because I'm withholding or doing whatever, or I'm not responding, or I'm not doing whatever. Like, no, I've just been, this is what's going on in my world, but this agreement 100% matters to me. Like, these are all conversations that we're just not really taught to have. Yeah. So, you know, we run along in all of our relationships many times having the default position is assumption and presumption. I think I know what you feel or think, which is a huge form of arrogance, like guilty of it too, by the way, because it's
I think we all are.
You know, like that's how we're raised. That's kind of, it's in us, and that's what happens to us at school. I mean, we see our teachers treat us that way. I don't know if you guys have had experiences where teachers tell you what you think.
Yeah.
Like, tell you, oh, you did it. What? Like, you know, or, oh, you're going to do this. Really? Like, haven't even done anything yet. You know what I mean? Like, so it starts at such an early age. And then that's just in the relationship sense, but that relationship out in the commercial world manifests as a sea of abandoned claims, because we're working on a massive assumption and presumption that we are this entity. We're showing up doing all these things, and we've just given all the property away. Like my living woman over here, she's just given it all away. It's over there, and I'm like, I don't know how to make the claim. I don't know how to start saying, actually, I showed up for work. My body showed up for work. Like, you did whatever over here, but I need to let you know that happened. So it flows through to every element from start to finish, the indoctrination of why we view things this way. And that's why I think if you can hold boundaries with your family, I mean, they should be the safest, but they can also be the prickliest, because, you know, they're used to us behaving a certain way. So they're like, what's wrong with you, girl? Like, you're coming at me different, you know? But if you can do it in those relationships and start to get really confident with it and start to have more vulnerable, transparent conversations, then you're going to be in a really great position to go out and do that in the world in a, you know, more of a benevolent business type sense, I would say. But it's the whole thing is just such a beautiful journey of learning in that way, and the richness of it, which, you know, if you go off and work in the corporate world and that's all you do, there's nothing wrong with that. People love it. They thrive. They can have great team relationships and all that kind of stuff. But there is a different energy there in terms of, like, you know, dog eat dog. And, you know, like you rarely see in the corporate world someone going, yeah, I made a mistake. Like, I didn't do that very well. I could have done that better, you know? It's all about blame shifting, and no, that wasn't me. Who just said that last email? That was definitely her, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that you mentioned, you know, just the way that we the living woman or the living man, how we kind of give everything away. And it is, I think, going through a lot of these processes is almost like this reclamation of self. And it actually brings me to a question that I want to ask, because I feel like it's like $1 million question, because the word's been thrown around so much, especially in the last few years, and so many people, I think, misunderstand what it means. But what's your explanation of sovereignty? What does it mean to be sovereign?
Oh, this word, I've kind of kicked it out and slammed the door shut in its face.
I know, because that's what I mean. It's been so misrepresented, I feel. But when I learned the true meaning of sovereignty, like, I'll just say what I feel it is.
What you understand of it, yeah.
So the true meaning of sovereignty is basically like you claiming this space, you claiming this vessel as you, like, it's not, and you're not giving that away, like, just to put it really simply. And so that's why, you know, the term sovereign citizen that got thrown around a lot, and well, you still hear it in the media. So that's how you know it's bullshit, is the sovereign citizen thing. It's kind of like an oxymoron, because the citizen is within the public. Like, you can't be a sovereign citizen. It doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's funny. I guess etymologically, if you go and look at the word, like, you know, it's pretty clear what it's meant to mean or intended to mean. And, you know, people will joke sometimes and go, well, you know, you can't be sovereign unless you've got, like, your own military or army, and, you know, like, because that's really, you know, how a sovereign entity is kind of seen to a degree as well. But look, for me, I think, unfortunately, because the media have grabbed that particular connotation, and because it is so linked to not, it's not, I've got to be really careful how I say it, because it's not really wrong, as in this understanding of my living woman and as it relates to the commercial world. But, you know, there's this idea that the dead, a corporation, the dead, the fiction, you would have heard this, they can't, it's not that they can't see the living, they know we're there, but it can't interface. You've got a system that is built mechanically to do certain things that can really only see form and a little bit of substance, like as in you've got to walk it out, but you're trying to get a dead entity to interact with a living one. So it's just not, there's no alignment there. And so they've created this kind of connotation around the word. The word that I would prefer to use, I don't really love that word anymore. I prefer to use the term commercial maturity, because at the end of the day, I've been put in a position, let me rephrase that. At the end of the day, a situation was created that I had no control over. And I think my parents are my mother and father are very regretful of it. They didn't know. Everyone does it. But they created a situation, and that is the situation. So what I can either do certain things to deny it, or I can be like, well, there's my big ass merchant ship, and I'm going to learn how to steer it. And I'm going to go in there and steer it with proficiency. That's my theory at the moment. So I prefer to think of it as commercial maturity, because it is a commercial situation, essentially. And then for me, it's really just about reclamation. In my woman, once I get that commercial maturity, I actually love it, because now that's a whole separate part. Like when I think of myself as sovereign, it's like everything's enmeshed. Like, you know, I'm sovereign and I'm like fighting this thing, but I already know that that's over there. So it's commercial maturity I need there. And in the rest of my woman, all I need to worry about is staying in alignment, staying in flow. And that, it's funny how a word can create like hang-ups like that. But I would say that, you know, I prefer to view it that way now. Yeah.
I was going to say that. Yeah, because so many things get attached to the word. And that's what I obviously first learned of. Like, I mean, I'd heard the word sovereign before, but had no understanding. And then I learned of it through all this kind of law stuff. But
I was raised in a Christian family, and we always were taught that only God is sovereign, because he's like literally nothing higher.
Well, and that's why it's interesting, because now that I've completely detached the word from that whole world of law, it doesn't mean that to me anymore. Like that's what it means to me. It's more like this reclamation. It's like, like claiming your vessel, claiming what it is to be you and the space that you take up. And again, what comes along with that is responsibility. Like I don't think you can be quote unquote sovereign without taking full responsibility for yourself or whatever it is that word is being attached to. Because Leanne Lapinto, who we had on, she talks about sexual sovereignty, this concept of sexual sovereignty. And I don't know if that's something she came up with, or it's I don't know where she got the term from, but I love it because it's really like the way that she talks about it. It is, again, this reclamation of our sexuality because it's been so warped. And so I think it is a really beautiful thing. It's just very misunderstood.
Yeah, I think in context like that, it's a very beautiful thing. I think for me, because what's happening in some, aspects of the legal scenario is this idea of, when you look at ancient types of law, I just read 2 amazing journal articles written, these are they're legal scholars. They actually said law merchant, for example. This particular article that's in the New South Wales law journals and also being published in the US, it states specifically that law merchant, lex mercatoria, continues to defy lawyers. That means most of the lawyers operating legal, practicing lawyers, they don't understand it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So what they're saying is that commercial water world court is set up for commercial water world court. It's not going to, without a certain type of process, probably acknowledge or honor that law. It doesn't mean it's not there. They're literally saying it defies the lawyers. They don't even understand it. It's not taught to them because they want a certain type of process happening over there. So why would they tell, the average lawyer this, and this? So, I think the sovereign citizen thing for me is where I'm very detached, I think, from the word sovereign, is that because of it's like anything the media do. If they want to create a bias and have people crazy label, that's the term that they tend to use. And what it does is, for people that are not researched or knowledgeable or doing any due diligence, they'll take that and go, yeah, that's a crazy person trying to buck the system. But that accusation and the truth are not they're not the same. The truth is that all of these laws exist. And so that's why I prefer commercial maturity, because I'm looking at their commercial system. I'm looking at law, not legal law, the provisions in the law, and I'm trying to create a level of knowledge that I can have capacity in that forum. So it's not, if you say that, I'm doing sovereign, blah, 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 people automatically have this connotation. But this is not about that. It is about lawful literacy and commercial maturity to navigate this thing that was imposed, presumably, placed onto me, but then I can now step forward and go, well, hang on, I think there's been a mistake, and I don't want to do it with any fight. So that's just, it's just a bit problematic that the media have taken that term, and then people that have tried to stand and tried to learn and understand the mechanics, the media will hang them out to dry. So it's pretty easy to see why they've done it. But I think in cases like that, the word's beautifully used or applied.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. We could keep going probably another 4 hours.
I know.
My brain is getting I need to go write down all the words I don't know and I need to study. Definitely go back and listen to this episode again. Anyone that's feeling like I am, we're like, yeah, I've got a lot to learn, but I'm excited about learning more about commercial maturity. That sounds
and we definitely need to get our hands on a copy of the Black's Law Dictionary. Like everyone says, it's such a great place to start, just in terms of, again, like you're learning a new language. So yeah, we definitely need to get our hands on one of those, and then we'll listen back to this episode and look up all the words.
Although I didn't mean to be I hope it's, what I've said kind of makes sense. But also etymology online, like when you, if you go to Black's Law and then you jump onto etymology, you'll be fascinated at the breakdown of words. And I don't know, like maybe it is just because I'm a geek, but if you actually go in there, there's something in my heart where it's healing, because I'm like, and they did that. And it's just like, there's a lot of wow moments there. If you could play a game, have dinner, play a game where you go let's check this word out. And you can
for sure. Yeah. And I think it is really powerful to, essentially take that power back, and just even in the words that we use.
Yeah, that's another side business you can start, Skye. You can make like a scattergories, but it's Black's Law.
I love that. That's great.
For really big brands.
Yeah. That's a great idea. And you guys are going to get off the call and be like, yeah, definitely no one's going to date her because she's going to make her have an agreement and she's going to play etymology online during the date.
I love it. I reckon people are going to be listening to this going, I'm totally
I think it
into
actually would help though. Like that was one thing Alexa gives me shit for with Robert Kiyosaki. They have a board game. It's really good for teaching accounting and basic business stuff, and how to get out of the rat race. It's called Cash Flow. And I recommend anyone that wants to get better at managing their life financially to get that. But the learning as a game is really powerful. You gamify it and you absorb it. It's fun. It's like your inner child starts to play with it. And I recommend that. If you could do that for legal stuff, I would buy it.
It's a really good idea.
I'll give it a try. But I agree with you. Robert Kiyosaki is great. And you learn about each other playing games. You've got to get off our phones and start playing games again. So I'm down for that.
I love it.
Yeah, nerd games. Yes.
Well, for anyone that wants to get involved and work with you, Skye, actually, and also before you give all your details, which we'll put in the show notes anyway, if people are wanting to sort of start doing these processes, obviously, I guess it depends on, whether they're wanting to start a PMA or do a trust, or what avenue they're wanting to take. But where is the best place to start? Would you say start learning the language? Is there things they can look up online, or would you definitely say seek someone out and work with someone or do a course or something?
It depends where people are at. The first thing I would recommend, if someone doesn't have a hair on fire situation or just wants to map out a course for starting, I would really start to look at just your belief systems and journaling your belief systems, and what are the stories that have created that belief, and why do you think something looks this way, and what could the alternative be if you're not in a rush to go out and do things. Because once you get really clear, no one taught me to do that at the start. I've had to do that as I go. But if I had have actually consciously sat and done that at the beginning, I probably could have had a really different journey. Not that I'm not stoked about the one I've had, but just really looking inside at what is my intention. And in anything that we do, if I'm going to go down this line of inquiry, what is the vision? Is it for my kids? Is it for, just to be the counter to all of the ignorance that I've allowed and, all this sort of stuff? There are courses that I can direct people to. I'm not offering anything particularly of my own at this point. I'm working on just my own study and projects, but I'm happy to help direct people to different lines of inquiry that can help them, particularly where they're at on their journey. So, because at the end of the day, no one has really the answers. So, my lighthouse really is about a beacon, and you'll find people in your life that are beacons for you, and that beacon will just shine you where to go next. But I think once you commit and make that intention at the start, and you know what your vision is, what is my value? Why am I doing this? Why does this matter? Then the course will just be mapped almost for you. So, yeah, I'm happy to be a point of reference to, direct people on where they can go to edify themselves, because the law is so nutrient dense.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we'll pop your contact details in the show notes so that people can just get in touch with you if they do want some guidance. And so grateful for people like you too that do speak about this stuff, because it is so important to get out there and open people's minds up to it, and so that they can start going through their own processes. So thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. And it's a real joy. Real joy.
Thank you for listening to Natural AF. I hope you all enjoyed this as much as we enjoyed recording it and putting it out there for you. These episodes are a lot of fun. They're always packed with some kind of gold nugget or something valuable that you can share with family or friends, someone in your friend circle that might get a lot out of this. If you're following us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to give us a rating or review. That goes a long way to helping boost the show, and that actually makes it come up in more people's feeds and spreads the word and makes us easier to find. We appreciate everyone's effort and support for helping the show grow, and we will see you next week on Natural AF.